Imagine the Sierra Nevada mountains in 1855, shrouded in fog like a veil over forgotten sins. A black woman stands alone on a blood-soaked ridge, her hands clutching gold that whispers of divine wrath. But this fortune? It's built on vanished souls, erased by a shadow no man dares name. What unholy pact turned her from slave to sovereign, and at what eternal cost? In the shadowed annals of America's wildest fever dream, where the earth itself seemed to bleed yellow veins of temptation, one woman's story cuts through the haze like a knife forged in hellfire. The California gold rush of the 1850s wasn't just a scramble for riches, it was a biblical trial, a modern Sodom where greed devoured the soul, and only the cunning survived the divine reckoning. Amid the clamor of broken men and shattered picks, Eliza May Johnson emerged not as a victim of the era's merciless prejudice, but as its silent judge, her rise a parable of redemption twisted with the chill of retribution. Born into the suffocating chains of Georgia's cotton fields in 1825, Eliza's early life was a testament to the human spirit's unyielding flame against the winds of oppression. The sun-baked earth under her feet, cracked and thirsty like the promises of freedom that dangled just out of reach. Whips cracked like thunder from an angry god, marking her skin and searing her resolve. She toiled from dawn's first blush to the moon's mocking gaze, her hands calloused not just from labor, but from clutching at fragments of dignity in a world that deemed her less than human. Freedom came not as a gift from heaven, but as a hard-won barter. Years of secret savings, whispered deals in the dead of night, a sum scraped together from blood and sweat. Yet in the South, liberty for a black woman was a fragile illusion, haunted by the ghosts of lynch mobs and Jim Crow's creeping shadow. It was a cage without bars, where every glance from a white man carried the weight of potential damnation. The whispers of California reached her like a siren's call from across the abyss. A land where gold flowed like manna from the mountains, where the old hierarchies might crumble under the weight of raw ambition. But Eliza knew better than to trust in fairy tales. This was no promised land, but a crucible where souls were tested, refined, or reduced to ash. In 1849, as the rush swelled into a tidal wave of humanity, she made her choice, a perilous voyage around Cape Horn, the southern tip of the world where oceans raged like the fury of forgotten gods. The ship, a creaking wooden beast named the Eternal Hope, groaned under the assault of tempests that seemed sent by divine displeasure. Salt spray lashed her face like penance, the hold reeking of vomit, fear, and the metallic tang of chains still fresh in her memory. Weeks blurred into months, the horizon a mocking line between despair and destiny. Storms howled psalms of destruction, waves crashing like judgments upon the wicked, and Eliza, huddled in the dim light of a lantern, prayed not to a distant deity, but to the fire within her, a spark of resilience that whispered, "You are not broken, you are forged." San Francisco greeted her in the spring of 1850 like a fevered hallucination. A sprawling tent city perched on hills that sloped into the bay, where fog rolled in like the breath of ghosts. The streets were rivers of mud, sucking at boots with a greedy slurp, dotted with the skeletal frames of half-built saloons and gambling dens. The air thrummed with a polyglot symphony, Chinese merchants haggling in rapid Cantonese, Australian convicts bellowing sea shanties, Mexicans whispering prayers to saints amid the chaos. Wood smoke curled from campfires, mingling with the acrid stench of gunpowder, unwashed flesh, and the sweet rot of ambition gone sour. Ships lay abandoned in the harbor, their masts like barren trees in a forsaken forest, crews having deserted for the promise of inland strikes. Eliza stepped ashore with nothing but a threadbare dress clinging to her frame, a satchel heavy with mementos, a faded Bible page from her mother's hands, a sliver of Georgia soil wrapped in cloth, and eyes that burned with the quiet ferocity of a prophet in exile. Prejudice here was no subtle poison, it was a blunt instrument, wielded with the casual cruelty of men who saw color as a curse from on high. Black folks, free or not, were shoved to the fringes, porters hauling crates through the muck, cooks slaving over iron stoves in makeshift eateries, their labor the invisible scaffold upon which white fortunes were built. Whispers followed Eliza like shadows, "What business has she here?" But she moved with a grace that defied them, her posture a silent sermon on unbowed pride. She found work in a laundry tent on the outskirts, where steam rose like incense from boiling vats, clouding the air and stinging her eyes like tears unshed. Her hands plunged into scalding water, raw and blistered, scrubbing the filth from miners' trousers caked in river silt and sweat. The work was infernal, a daily ritual of purification for the sins of others, but it positioned her as the unseen confessor of Serpent's Gulch. Miners, their faces etched with the lines of avarice and exhaustion, dropped off bundles wrapped in burlap, their voices carrying fragments of stories like gold flakes in a pan. She listened as she worked, her ears attuned to the rhythm of revelation. Boasts tumbled out like spilled nuggets, hit a vein thick as my arm up by the fork, gonna buy me a kingdom back east. Laments followed, heavy as lead, lost it all at the faro table, devil's own luck. Whispers of strikes, disputes, and dark deeds clung to the fabric, shaken loose by her deft hands. The laundry became her tabernacle, a place where secrets were laundered alongside linens, emerging clean but never forgotten. Eliza's mind, sharp as a miner's pick, mapped the web of human frailty, the ruthless who preyed on the weak, the desperate who gambled souls for scraps, the fleeting triumphs that evaporated like morning mist. She saw gold not as a blessing, but as a curse from Eden's tree, tempting men to bite and fall. Her own earnings trickled in, pennies hoarded in a pouch sewn into her skirt's hem, a growing testament to her thrift. Meals were sparse, hardtack and beans, flavored with resolve, sleep a-fleeting.
Visitor in her cramped boarding house room, where walls thin as paper echoed the night's debauchery, gunshots punctuating arguments, laughter turning to sobs. As months turned to seasons, Eliza's observations deepened into insight, a spiritual awakening amid the material madness. She pored over yellowed newspapers discarded in the mud, teaching herself the arcane language of claims and deeds under the flicker of a tallow candle. Words became weapons, knowledge a shield against the chaos. The gold rush, she realized, was no random frenzy, it was a divine drama, where providence rewarded the vigilant and punished the proud. Merchants in starched collars grew fat not from digging, but from controlling the flow, supplying picks at inflated prices, extending credit like nooses around necks. Bankers hoarded dust in vaults, their smiles masks over predatory hearts. Saloon owners poured poison that loosened tongues and wallets alike. Eliza aspired not to grub in the dirt like beasts, but to rise above, an architect of fate in a land where God seemed distant, yet his judgments manifest in every landslide, every fevered death. By late 1850, drawn by rumors of richer veins, she relocated to Serpent's Gulch, a jagged scar in the Sierra foothills where pines loomed like sentinels over the damned. The camp was a feverish hive, Main Street a quagmire of churned earth, flanked by leaning tents and clapboard shacks that shuddered in the wind. The air carried the crisp bite of resin, undercut by the sour reek of sweat and whiskey, the metallic zing of unearthed ore. Here, fortunes flipped like coins in a gambler's palm, men arriving destitute, leaving kings or corpses. Eliza staked her own claim not in rock, but in canvas, a modest laundry tent at the crossroads, where a perpetual fire crackled under iron kettles, steam rising like prayers to an indifferent sky. She became the Gulch's quiet oracle, her presence a constant amid the flux. Miners trudged in at dawn, faces smeared with grime, eyes hollow from nights haunted by dreams of strikes. They left clothes and, unwittingly, confessions, maps sketched on scraps, grudges muttered under breath, fears confessed in weary sighs. Winter's descent in 1851 was a biblical plague, snow blanketing the gulch like a shroud over sins unconfessed. Winds wailed through canyons like the cries of lost souls, frost etching patterns on tent flaps that mimicked the veins of gold below. The cold seeped into bones, slowing the dig but amplifying despair. Men huddled around sputtering fires, their breath clouds of fleeting warmth. It was in this frozen purgatory that the shadows lengthened, birthing a terror that whispered of divine justice unchecked. The disappearances began subtly, like the first flakes of a storm that would bury all. Old Man Hemlock, a stooped figure with a beard like tangled roots, vanished from his claim along the Serpent River. His site, once yielding steady flakes, lay abandoned, tools scattered like offerings to a wrathful deity, tents sagging under snow's weight. Whispers in the saloon painted him as a victim of elements or envy. Fool thought he could cheat the reaper, one miner growled, his voice trembling despite the bravado. But Eliza, sorting his final wash, noted the absence of his talisman, a carved ebony bird, smooth from years of fretful rubbing, a relic from a life before the rush. It was no mere trinket, it was his anchor, a symbol of fragile hope amid exile. Its vanishing felt orchestrated, a thief not of gold, but of essence, as if some force sought to erase not just the man, but his very spirit. Then the Miller brothers, robust sons of Ohio soil, evaporated after a raucous night of revelry. Their tent stood empty, a half-frozen meal on the table like a Last Supper interrupted, the air still thick with tobacco's ghost. Eliza, retrieving their linens, unearthed a journal hidden beneath floorboards, a chronicle of dread, pages scrawled with trembling hand. Entries spoke of shadows stalking their dig, an unseen gaze that chilled like winter's grasp, strange runes etched into boundary stones that evoked ancient curses. Something watches, one line read, not man, not beast, perhaps the mountain's own vengeance for our greed. The words hung like icicles, a testament to fear that clawed at the soul, hinting at a retribution beyond mortal ken. The vanishings multiplied, each a stroke in a macabre painting, Lars the Swede, silent and steadfast, gone after panning a stone that gleamed unnaturally, as if infused with forbidden light. Patrick O'Leary, fiery Irish brawler, lost amid a dispute over lines marked by peculiar, glyph-like rocks that seemed placed by no human hand. Not just men, but their legacies, promising claims dissolving into ether, only to resurface under strangers' names, men with eyes cold as quartz, arriving like specters from the mist. The Gulch's self-styled sheriff, Silas Croft, offered platitudes laced with indifference, a grim-faced arbiter whose investigations ended in shrugs and spittle. Mountains claimed their due, he'd mutter, his voice a gravelly echo of resignation, but his gaze averted from the growing unease, as if complicit in the silence. Eliza perceived the pattern, a chilling symmetry that spoke of calculated malice, not chaos. Each victim had tasted success as nectar, a vein struck, a nugget unearthed, only to be plucked like ripe fruit by an invisible harvester. Personal relics vanished too, a locket here, a heirloom knife there, tokens of identity stolen as if to mock the soul's permanence. It evoked biblical echoes, the mark of Cain, wandering cursed, Pharaoh's plague stripping the proud. Was this divine justice, meted out for the sin of avarice in a land stripped bare? Or a human hand, cloaked in supernatural dread, wielding fear as a tool? Eliza's laundry became her confessional booth, where she pieced the mosaic, whispers of a ghost claim jumper, a figure glimpsed in twilight, moving with ethereal grace. Her own spirit stirred with a mix of empathy and resolve, empathy for the fallen, whose greed mirrored humanity's fall, resolved to navigate this abyss, turning shadows into stepping stones. As snow thawed into spring's reluctant bloom, Eliza's savings grew, a hidden cache symbolizing her ascent from bondage to budding sovereignty. She expanded her operation, hiring a young runaway to tend the fires, her tent evolving into a hub where information flowed freer than the river. But the disappearances lingered like a spiritual stain, a reminder that in this gold-cursed Eden, redemption came at a price, and justice, divine or otherwise, watched with unblinking eyes. Eliza May Johnson was no mere survivor, she was a vessel, channeling the era's turmoil into a legacy that would eclipse the mountains themselves. Yet as she delved deeper, the chill deepened. What if the force erasing these men was not wrath from above, but a mirror of her own unyielding ambition? The Gulch held its breath, waiting for the next soul to vanish into the void. The winter's grip on Serpent's Gulch tightened like the coils of its namesake, a biblical serpent slithering through Eden's ruins, tempting with promises of wealth while poisoning the soul. Snowdrifts piled against tent flaps like barriers to the underworld, and the wind carried moans that could be mistaken for the cries of the damned. In this forsaken outpost, where men's ambitions clashed against the unyielding Sierra Nevada, Eliza May Johnson felt the first icy fingers of revelation clutch her heart. No longer mere accidents or the whims of a cruel frontier, the disappearances revealed themselves as threads in a tapestry of calculated evil, a conspiracy rooted in the earth's hidden sins, where greed transcended gold and veered into the realm of forbidden knowledge. The Miller brothers' journal, now her sacred relic, lay concealed beneath the warped planks of her laundry tent, its pages a confessional of terror that echoed the psalms of lamentation. By the dim flicker of a lantern's flame, casting elongated shadows that danced like accusing spirits on the canvas walls, Eliza pored over its contents. The air inside was thick with the residual steam of her day's labor, mingled with the faint, acrid scent of tallow smoke that stung her eyes like unshed tears of foreboding. Her fingers, still raw from lie and cold, traced the ink symbols, interlocking triangles and circles, crude yet precise, evoking ancient seals from Solomon's grimoires, marks that bound demons or unlocked curses. These were no idle sketches, they pulsed with intent, appearing beside entries of bountiful strikes and mounting paranoia, as if the brothers had unwittingly transcribed a language of doom. The paper itself felt alive under her touch, brittle edges crumbling like the fragility of human resolve, each crinkle a whisper from the grave. Shadows follow us, one passage read, the handwriting jagged as if scrawled in haste under a watchful eye. The rocks speak in tongues no Christian should hear. Eliza's mind raced, connecting these enigmas to the vanished men's claims. Hemlocks patch by the river, where dark volcanic boulders loomed like altars to pagan gods, absorbing sunlight and exhaling chill. Larza's panning spot amid gnarled oaks, their twisted roots mimicking the very symbols, as if the trees themselves were guardians of buried secrets. And the millers dig near Devil's Tooth, a monolithic spire of granite that pierced the sky like a fong from hell's maw, where winds howled dirges that chilled the marrow. The landscape of Serpent's Gulch, she realized, was no random chaos, it was a divine manuscript, inscribed by a creator's hand or a deceiver's claw, mapping veins not just of metal, but of moral peril. To tread here was to tempt Providence, to dig was to unearth one's own judgment. Eliza's days blurred into a ritual of vigilance, her laundry a confessional where sinners unwittingly bared their souls. Steam rose from boiling vats like incense in a shadowed cathedral, clouding the air and veiling her sharp gaze as miners deposited bundles stained with earth and sweat. She observed the newcomers who profited from the voids left by the lost, Elias Thorne, a spectral figure with hollow cheeks and eyes like polished obsidian, reflecting nothing but inner voids. He had claimed Hemlock's sight overnight, his rags traded for woolens that whispered of sudden fortune, yet carried a lingering odor, not of gold's clean gleam, but of something deeper, metallic and profane, like blood mixed with ore. Thorne's hands, when he paid in dust-flecked pouches, trembled as if the wealth scorched his flesh, a mark of Cain upon his palms. His demeanor shifted like sand in a storm, once desperate, now laced with a predatory calm, his glances darting like a thief evading divine sight. Then there was Arthur Finch, the merchant whose general store squatted at the Gulch's heart like a spider in its web. His smile stretched too thin over teeth yellowed by tobacco, eyes hawk-sharp, missing no flicker of weakness. Finch thrived on ruin, hawking supplies at usurious rates, his ledger's a ledger of souls indebted. Whispers linked him to Sheriff Silas Croft, their midnight conclaves in the saloon's dim corners, heads bowed like conspirators in Judas's betrayal, gestures heavy with unspoken pacts. Eliza caught a glimpse of Finch's pendant, silver glinting against his vest like a trader's coin, the same interlocking forms, a talisman of allegiance to some occult brotherhood, evoking the golden calf's idolatry amid the rush's frenzy. The miners' murmurs grew into a chorus of dread, huddled around potbelly stoves where flames crackled like hellfire's prelude. Mountain spirits claim their toll, an old prospector rasped, his voice gravelly from dust-choked lungs, eyes wide with the superstition of one who had seen too many graves. Dig too deep, and ye wake the old ones. But Eliza discerned the human hand behind the spectral veil, orchestrated purge, claims vanishing like offerings to Moloch, forming a noose around the Serpent's moor, a canyon shrouded in perpetual mist, its depths rumored to harbor beasts or banshees. This forsaken cleft, with walls sheer as judgment's cliffs and floors littered with bones of failed seekers, beckoned like the abyss in Nietzsche's gaze. One twilight, as Eliza mended a shirt for young Thomas, a fresh-faced lad with calluses fresh as his illusions, she overheard his complaint to a veteran, "Cursed ground, I tell ya." Found a rock by Hemlock's old spot, etched with queer lines, triangles tangled in circles, sharp as a blade's edge. Her needle paused, heart thundering like Sinai's quake. "What markings?" she inquired, voice steady as Ruth's loyalty, though her pulse betrayed inner turmoil. Thomas shrugged, tossing the memory like discarded slag, jumbled nonsense. "Lobbed it back in the stream, ain't courting no devil's luck." The revelation settled in her gut like leaden sin, confirming the symbol's earthly presence, not phantoms, but deliberate signs, wards or invitations to a power beyond Orm's allure. This was no mere gold grab, it was dominion over a veiled empire, claims cleared like fields for harvest, hiding a substance that defied the rush's crude pans. Eliza's suspicions crystallized into conviction. The disappeared had brushed against this enigma, silenced to preserve its sanctity. Her spirit wrestled with the moral quagmire, curiosity a serpent's whisper, urging her toward knowledge that could redeem her past bondage or damn her eternally. The tense air grew oppressive, shadows lengthening as if the Gulch's secret seeped through the seams, marking her as the next penitent in this frontier confessional. Emboldened by nights of prayer, knees pressed to the dirt floor, Bible open to Revelation's seals, Eliza embraced a duality of existence, a Jekyll and Hyde forged in the rush's furnace. By daylight, she embodied humility's veil, hands plunging into suds that foamed like atonement's waters, face serene amid the rhythmic scrub and rinse, the scent of soap a camouflage for her probing mind. Miners saw only the dutiful black woman, her presence a fixture like the eternal pines, yet her ears captured confessions dropped like unintended alms. By moonlight, she transformed into a seeker of truths, slipping through the Gulch's veins like a ghost in pursuit of absolution. Discreet queries wove into casual men's, heard tell of that claim's history, she'd ask over a steaming cup, eyes locking on faces for the twitch of guilt, the averted gaze of complicity. From rummaged refuse, faded maps yellowed as ancient scrolls, she gleaned the symbol's origins, not whimsy, but vestiges of indigenous lore, markers for deposits rare as manna, elements entwined with gold but elusive, demanding rites of extraction lost to time. Indian scribbles, miners scoffed, spittle arcing like dismissed prophecy, but the journal's hum of unnatural rocks, cold yet warm, compass confounding, hinted at magnetic anomalies, perhaps iron parides or something arcane, vibrating with Earth's forbidden pulse. Venturing to forsaken sites at dawn's hesitant light, when fog cloaked the world like a shroud over Lazarus's tomb, Eliza's boots crunched over frost-kissed gravel, breath misting in the crisp air laced with pine's resinous prayer. The ground shifted subtly underfoot, warmer patches defying winter's decree. Cooler voids like graves awaiting occupants. Symbols emerged, weathered into boulders, faint triangles ensnaring circles, evoking the trinity entangled in sin's cycle. Vegetation betrayed the anomaly, stunted moss in bilious green, thriving where life should falter, tendrils curling like fingers from the underworld. These were signs of disturbance, harbingers of a vein that promised not just wealth, but dominion, perhaps a load of quicksilver or rare earths, tools for alchemical mastery in an age of industry. Her gaze sharpened on Finch and Croft, the merchant a Pharisee in profiteer's garb, pendant his phylactery of deceit, the sheriff a pilot washing hands of justice. Their nocturnal summons, patrols timed to quash curiosity, and the furtive thugs, faces scarred as Cain's brow, trailing mud to the moor's edge, painted a cabal of control. One sun-dappled afternoon, delivering linens to Finch's lair, shelves groaning with picks and provisions like temptations arrayed, Eliza glimpsed his sanctum, a map unfurled on oaken desk, inked with the Gulch's contours, dotted with the damning symbols in a constellation of conspiracy. Lines converged on the moor, a nexus of power where secrets lay interred like the talents in parable, awaiting the faithful or the foolhardy. Eliza's soul teetered on redemption's edge, her pursuit a quest for justice against the oppressors who mirrored her southern tormentors, yet risking the hubris that felled Icarus. The Gulch's winds whispered warnings, but her resolve hardened like forged steel, a black woman's defiance against a white man's shadowed empire. What lay beneath? A boon from heaven or bait from hell? The answers beckoned from the moor's maw, promising fortune or finality. The back room of Arthur Finch's general store reeked of old leather, spilled whiskey, and the sour tang of fear barely masked by tobacco smoke. A single lantern swung from a rusted hook overhead, its flame guttering like a dying soul, throwing jagged shadows across the walls that seemed to lean inward, listening. Finch sat enthroned behind his massive oak desk, fingers drumming an erratic tattoo on the scarred wood, each tap a heartbeat betraying the calm he tried to project. Sheriff Silas Croft loomed at his shoulder, hand resting on the ivory grip of a Colt, thumb caressing the hammer with the casual intimacy of a man who had ended lives without losing sleep. Jed blocked the doorway like a human barricade, arms crossed over a chest broad as a barrel, eyes flat and empty as river stones worn smooth by murder. Into this den of predators stepped Eliza May Johnson, dressed in her plainest calico, the fabric still carrying the faint clean scent of lye soap, a scent that now felt like armor against their filth. She carried the Miller brothers' journal like Moses descending Sinai with tablets of accusation. Placing it on the desk between them was deliberate theater. The worn leather cover caught the lantern light, revealing faint stains that could have been ink, or blood. The room went deathly still. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. Finch's eyes flicked to the book, then to her face. For a heartbeat, his merchant's mask cracked, lips thinning, pupils contracting like a snake tasting danger. "Eliza May," he said, voice oiled but strained, "Jed here says you've got something worth discussing. A claim. A proposition." He leaned forward slightly, as though the desk were a confessional screen. "Let's hear it." She met his gaze without flinching. In that moment, the weight of every lash she'd endured in Georgia, every whispered slur in San Francisco, every vanished soul she'd mourned in silence, all of it coalesced into quiet steel. "I have knowledge, Mr. Finch," she said, voice low and measured, carrying the cadence of someone who had learned to speak truth in the presence of liars. "Knowledge heavier than any nugget you've ever weighed." She slid the journal forward another inch. The soft scrape of leather on wood sounded louder than a gunshot. Finch stared at it as though it might bite. Croft's fingers tightened on his revolver, the leather creaked. Jed shifted, boots grinding sawdust into the floorboards. "This belonged to the Miller brothers," Eliza continued. "Men who found more than gold near Devil's Tooth. They found a rock, dark, heavy, humming like a hive of bees trapped in stone. A rock that spun their compasses like tops, that made their skin prickle and their dreams turn sour."
This belonged to the Miller brothers, Eliza continued. "Men who found more than gold near Devil's Tooth. They found a rock dark, heavy, humming like a hive of bees trapped in stone. A rock that spun their compasses like tops, that made their skin prickle and their dreams turn sour. They sketched the symbols near it. The same symbols you've been erasing from the Gulch one claim at a time." Finch's laugh was sharp, forced. "Superstition and tall tales, girl. Men vanish every day out here. Mountains swallow M. Rivers drown M. Whiskey and bad luck finish the rest." "Do they?" Eliza asked softly. She opened the journal to a marked page, the ink still dark against yellowed paper. They wrote of shadows following them. Of men watching from the ridges. Of a smell acrid, metallic, that clung to their clothes after they passed the old cabin on the moor's edge. "The same smell that hangs around your back door some nights, Mr. Finch." Croft took a half step forward. "Careful now." Eliza ignored him, eyes locked on Finch. They suspected the symbols weren't Indian doodles. They were boundary markers old as sin guarding something rarer than gold. Something you kill to keep secret. Something that poisons the air and the men who touch it. The room felt smaller, the air denser, as though the gulch itself pressed against the walls. Finch's drumming fingers stilled. Sweat gleamed at his temples despite the chill. "You're accusing me of murder," he said, voice dangerously quiet. "I'm stating facts," she replied. "The Millers vanished the night after they wrote this. Hemlock too. Lars. Patrick. All of them near those markers. All of them after finding something that made the earth hum. And every claim they left behind ended up in your ledger, or under a name you control." Jed growled low in his throat, a sound like gravel shifting before an avalanche. Eliza turned her gaze to him briefly. "You were there the night they took the last one. I heard the struggle. The thud. The silence after. I saw the tracks leading toward the moor." Finch slammed a palm on the desk. The lantern jumped, shadows leaped. "Enough. You think you can walk in here with a dead man's scribbles and threaten me? In my own store? With my men at the door?" "I didn't come to threaten," Eliza said. "I came to bargain." Silence stretched taut as a hangman's rope. Finch leaned back slowly, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Bargain. Interesting. And what exactly do you think you're selling, Eliza May?" "Silence," she answered. "And partnership." Croft snorted. Jed actually laughed, a short, ugly bark.
Eliza continued as though they hadn't spoken. I know what you're mining isn't just gold. It's something else, something the old ones marked because it was dangerous. Mercury, maybe. Or arsenic-laced ore. Something that needs to be processed in secret, away from prying eyes. Something that sickens men if they're careless. That's why the cabin reeks. That's why witnesses disappear. You can't have loose tongues talking about a vein that kills as much as it pays. Finch's face had gone pale beneath the lantern glow. His merchant's calculation flickered behind the fury, greed warring with fear. You want in, he said slowly, testing the words. I want security, she corrected. A share. Not of the gold's the veil. A share of the real prize. Enough to build something permanent here. Enough to never be at anyone's mercy again. In return, I stay quiet. I keep washing your shirts, listening to your men, making sure no one else starts asking questions. And if anyone does? She let the sentence hang. I make sure the questions stop. Croft's hand eased off his revolver, just a fraction. Jed's shoulders relaxed a hair. Finch studied her for a long moment, the way a man studies a poker hand he can't quite read. Then he laughed, genuine this time, though edged with something dark. You're a bold one, I'll give you that. Most colored women in your place would be begging for their lives right now. I'm not most women, Eliza said simply. Another silence, heavier than the first. Finch glanced at Croft, who gave the slightest nod. Then at Jed, who shrugged as if to say, your funeral, boss. All right, Finch said at last. We'll talk terms. But understand this, Eliza May, you step wrong, just one misstep and you'll join the others. No body. No grave. Just gone. Like they never existed. I understand, she replied. Better than you think. She stood, gathering the journal with steady hands. I'll expect a fair offer. Soon. As she moved toward the door, Jed stepped aside reluctantly, but he stepped. The cold night air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and distant snow. Eliza walked out into the darkness of Serpent's Gulch, heart pounding so fiercely she thought the stars must hear it. She had not begged. She had not broken. She had bargained with devils, and won the first round. But bargains with darkness are never clean. They leave stains on the soul, on the ledger, on the future. Eliza May Johnson had just traded silence for power, ignorance for complicity. The Gulch's shadows stretched longer behind her, as though reaching to claim what was now theirs, and somewhere in the moor, beneath the cursed earth, the humming rock waited patient, poisonous, eternal. The game was no longer about survival. It was about dominion. The lantern flame trembled as though it sensed the shift in the room's gravity. Eliza May Johnson's words hung in the air like smoke from a fresh gunshot. She leaned forward just enough that the light caught the resolute line of her jaw, the unblinking depth in her eyes that had seen whips crack in Georgia fields, ships grown around Cape Horn, and now, the naked face of murder laid bare. Do they vanish? She repeated, softer now, each syllable a measured strike. Or are they made to vanish? Old Man Hemlock, his carved bird gone, a trophy plucked from a cooling corpse like a relic from a battlefield. Lars, the Swede, whispering of strange gleams in his pan before the snow swallowed him whole. Patrick O'Leary, raging over boundary stones etched with warnings older than any white man's claim, then erased as cleanly as chalk from slate. Every one of them brushed against your secret. Every one marked by those symbols. And every claim they left behind slid into your ledger before the blood dried. She paused, letting the silence do its work. Croft's revolver gleamed dully, the hammer clicked back another fraction, metal whispering promise of finality. I know what you're pulling from the earth isn't gold, Eliza continued, voice steady as a judge passing sentence. Gold's the mask you let the world see. The real prize is darker, heavier, something the mills and factories back east will pay fortunes for. A mineral that burns lungs, blackens fingertips, turns strong men to trembling shadows if mishandled. Mercury, perhaps. Or arsenic-laced cinnabar. Something that demands secrecy because its touch is death. I know about the cabin at the moor's edge, how the fumes cling to your men's clothes like guilt. How the moss dies around it in unnatural rings. How the ground hums when you crack the vein open. Finch's face had drained to the color of old parchment. His merchant's polish cracked wide, beneath it lay raw panic and the cold calculation of a man watching his empire. Teeter. Croft spoke first, voice gravel dragged over iron. You've seen too much, woman. You don't walk out of here. The hammer locked fully. The sound echoed like a coffin nail driven home. Eliza's lips curved, not in joy, but in the grim certainty of someone who had already counted the cost. Perhaps not tonight, she said. But others know. I've shared copies of the journal. My notes. The map I glimpsed in your office. Descriptions of the cabin. The smell. The men who do your silencing. If I don't leave this room breathing, if any harm comes to me or mine, those papers reach Sacramento. They reach the newspapers in San Francisco. They reach men who still believe in law, even in this wilderness. Your name becomes poison. Your wealth becomes evidence. The rush turns scandal. And you, Sheriff Croft, her gaze shifted to him, unyielding, become the face of corruption. A badge bought with blood. A man who traded justice for coin and found neither. Finch's eyes darted, first to Croft, then to Jed, then back to her. Rage warred with terror, ambition with the dawning horror that he had gravely misjudged the woman before him. He had seen only skin color, only gender, only a laundress scrubbing filth from miners' trousers. He had not seen the mind that mapped disappearances like constellations, that read landscapes like scripture, that forged survival into strategy in the furnace of bondage and exile. The silence stretched until it hurt. What do you want? Finch rasped at last. The words tasted like ash. A partnership, Eliza answered without hesitation. A significant share of the true enterprise, not the placer claims, not the fool's gold. The mineral. The processing. The quiet fortune that will outlast the rush. In exchange, my silence is ironclad. My eyes remain yours, spotting marked claims before outsiders stumble on them, reading the signs in stone and moss and minor gossip that your men miss. I become your safeguard. Your shadow partner. And I require guarantees. A notarized agreement, held by a man of unimpeachable standing in Sacramento. My safety. The safety of those I protect. Breach it, and the silence ends. Finch stared at her as though seeing her for the first time. His hand trembled as he pushed the journal back across the desk and offering a surrender. You drive a devil's bargain, Eliza May Johnson, he said, voice thick with resentment and something perilously close to respect. We have a deal. The handshake was brief, cold, electric with mutual distrust. Palm met palm like sealing a pact written in blood. Jed stepped aside without a word. Croft holstered his revolver with deliberate slowness, eyes never leaving her face. Eliza walked into the night. The Gulch's wind carried pine and frost and the distant clink of picks still searching for surface dreams. Behind her, 3 men sat in stunned quiet, realizing they had just admitted a judge, jury, and silent executioner into their inner circle. From that night, Eliza May Johnson's ascent was no longer whispered rumor, it became inexorable fact. She shed the laundry tent like a chrysalis. A sturdy clapboard building rose in its place, solid walls, iron stove, locked backroom where ledgers and samples were kept under key. Her name appeared on no mining deeds ever, but her cut flowed steadily, laundered through freight manifests and bank drafts. Finch's operation expanded under her guidance. She pointed out new veins before prospectors even scented them, reading the faint discoloration in spring runoff, the unnatural warmth of certain boulders at dawn, the patterns in miner talk that betrayed fresh strikes. The processing cabin worked nights, fumes vented carefully into the moor where no one ventured. The mineral, Cinnabar, rich in quicksilver, fed a growing demand in the east for mirrors, thermometers, explosives, medicine. Each flask shipped under false labels carried a fortune Eliza claimed without ever touching the retorts. By 1855, the placer gold was largely spent. Boomtowns shrank to ghost skeletons, miners drifted away poorer than they came, chasing rumors in Nevada or Oregon. Serpent's Gulch quieted to a mournful wind through empty saloons. But Eliza May Johnson was richer than any claim holder who ever swung a pick.
She invested with surgical precision.
Freight wagons bearing her mark rolled between Sacramento and the dying camps.
A modest bank opened its doors, fair rates, no questions for honest borrowers. Parcels in Sacramento's rising districts bore her signature on the deeds. Her house stood on a quiet street, 2 stories, whitewashed clapboard, windows that caught morning light like promises kept. Inside, a locked strongbox held the Miller Journal, a relic she never opened, yet never destroyed. A reminder. A warning. She never flaunted. Never boasted. Never explained. When whispers followed her, how did a colored woman rise so fast? They were met with shrugs, envy, or the convenient shield of prejudice. Luck, some said. Hard work, others allowed. The truth remained buried deeper than any vein. Finch stayed in the Gulch, wealthy beyond measure yet hollowed. His eyes carried permanent shadows, his smiles never warmed. He knew one word from her could end him. He lived in the cage he had helped build. Croft drifted to San Francisco, pockets lined, hands shaking when he poured whiskey. Nightmares followed him, faceless men dragged into darkness, the click of his own hammer. He died quietly years later, unnamed in any ledger of justice. Eliza used her fortune quietly. Schools for black children received anonymous donations. Families on the edge found rent paid, debts cleared. Voices too long silenced found small megaphones in Sacramento's growing civil rights circles, all from the shadows, all without fanfare. Redemption, perhaps, in fragments. She never spoke of Serpent's Gulch. Never named the mineral. Never confessed the blood price of her empire. Yet sometimes, late at night in her Sacramento study, with the city lights flickering beyond lace curtains, she would pause. Listen. And faintly, impossibly, she would hear it, the low, unending hum from beneath the earth. A reminder that some fortunes are dug from light, and some from darkness. And that the woman who once scrubbed miners' sins from canvas now carried the heaviest secret of them all. A secret guarded not by guns, but by silence. A silence she had purchased with courage, cunning, and the willingness to stare into the abyss, and bargain with what stared back. Her legend endures, the only black woman richer than any white miner by 1855. A riddle wrapped in shadow. A testament to resilience forged in fire. A chilling question left hanging in California's history. What price does freedom demand when the gold runs dry, and the poison runs deep?